but they are coloured blocks, various colours, and you have a design card.
Eli's just gone to get them.
He has left. Do we still record?
I guess we do. Just keep talking. Okay, we'll just keep talking. Also, I did try to not have a giggle because just before you were like, yeah, coloured blocks of various colours. And I'm like, square base cube.
Far out. Hello and welcome to the Integration Station. I'm your host, Michael, a child and adolescent occupational therapist. And with me today is Eleanor.
I'm also a child and adolescent occupational therapist.
How are you today?
I'm good. How are you?
Yeah, not too bad. Not too bad. Very excited to get through some questions that came through.
Yeah, absolutely.
So if you do have questions, as always, send them through to us. Podcast OTFC Group, that's our email address. Otherwise, OTFC Group on Instagram. And we like to find the fun in learning. About how to work with our young people and in our lives. Yes. Fun and laughter and all those things. But yes, we had a couple of questions that did come through, but we'll go through our regular segments to start, as we always do. But actually, I did something that came up yesterday, completely unrelated. I actually got back onto Instagram recently. I don't know why, but I was scrolling through something and it came up with, do you remember Scatman John?
Vaguely.
Scatman John?
Yes.
Eli's nodding. For those who don't know Scatman John, he had that song, beep, bop, 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 right? From the 90s. Huge song. Anyway, and then I was having, I was looking into Scatman John. And he was accomplished jazz pianist and other things, but he had a stutter when he was younger.
Oh.
And so that's how he came about with his style of singing, apparently. So when he was younger, he had this stutter and he had real difficulty with communication and his language. He passed away now, actually, sadly, in the late 90s. But he was very big advocate of the stuttering community in the US and spent a lot of time advocating for those with speech and language delays. And it was just interesting reading that. You know, I think of that song and I'm like, it's such a ridiculous, hilarious but fun song. But I'm like, but the way that he created it was based on the challenges that he had when he was younger. And it's that real, just because someone might see it as a deficit or a difference doesn't mean it is a deficit or difference. He used that strength to actually generate his interest in scat and other things.
Yeah.
So anyway, just a side thing, really
I think
cool.
that's amazing.
Yeah. So anybody out there, listen to Scatman John. Great song.
What this episode's sponsored by.
Yes. Sponsored by Scatman John. But shout out to him.
It's really cool, and I think it shows, because I think I can imagine that kind of style would lean itself into maybe how that communication and words might flow for someone who's managing that. And
yeah, sure.
Yeah, I think that's awesome.
Anyway. Well,
you just love a little rabbit hole to go down, don't you?
Doesn't everybody?
Yes.
If it's not Instagram or YouTube or TikTok, whatever, then people find ways to just venture and journey down, and it's the dopamine hit.
Yes.
Finding a pathway and just getting curious and then getting more and more curious. But yes, usually it's music related.
Yeah, I was going to say
find out
something about the 90s.
Yeah. Find something out. But let's get on to our regular segments with Activity of the Week.
Sounds good. Over to you, Eli.
Therapy, activity of the week.
My Activity of the Week. Well, this is actually, it came off the back of, at home, my wife sent me a video of my son and her doing this little activity with Duplo blocks.
Okay.
And what she had was like a coloured cards, like different Duplo shapes. And he had to match the shape designs to the cards.
Yep.
And it reminded me of an activity I used to do a lot, either in sessions, but also recommend to families as well with Lego blocks. Mm-hmm. So what we do is we'd start by using the Wedgets blocks. And for those who don't know, they've got different names now. You can get like coloured building blocks, as they're called on Amazon, for like $20. And they're pretty good. They're no Wedgets, a widget, official brand, but they're still pretty decent. And you have to try and make the design card, the colour blocks look like the design card. Yeah. Right? And so it's a real visual motor integration, visual perceptual skill in a fun way. And not everyone has Wedget blocks, so what I recommend is everyone would have Lego. And so I'd say just either take a photo of a Lego design, you do it yourself, take a photo, get a whole bunch of different designs, and then give your child the chance to try and copy those designs with a bunch of blank Lego pieces.
Yeah.
And that always worked really well because it was very accessible, very easy to use, and it was building on those skills quite successfully. So, anyway, that was one that came to mind. I'm like, geez, I haven't done that for a while.
Yeah.
So,
it's actually funny that you mentioned that around the widgets because working with a young person, we did a PD the other day and we were kind of like chatting through a few things and we were talking as a group about what different activities you might do with a young person with this profile, and someone suggested the widgets. I'm like, oh man, I can't remember the last time I did widgets. Yeah, I'm gonna do that. That sounds really good.
I did some on Wednesday actually with one of my clients.
Oh, that's cool.
Great.
Yeah, bring it back.
Bring back the widgets.
Actually, what you were mentioning just then, I, as an extension of that, sometimes do a game, variations of this, like Builders and Architects, where like bring in a communication piece around it. So with the widgets, it would be that someone would make a design and then they have to describe that to the other person, but you might have a barrier in between you so that you can't see what the design is and you're using only your words to communicate to the other person what it looks like, and you have the reveal to go, do ours look the same? And I was doing something similar to this using the Jenga Maker, which is using the different coloured Jenga pieces of various colours to make different designs. And I didn't necessarily have the barrier, but we took it in turns to use our words to describe to the other person. And isn't it so interesting? You say something and you're like, oh yeah, that is technically right how you've put that together, but it's not what I meant. So I'm going to have to work out how to pitch it in a different way. And then it's equally frustrating for the person potentially who's making it if they're not quite getting what the other person is saying, or the person who's speaking who can't quite find the words to describe it. And you just like have to sit on your hands to be like, oh, I just mean like this. So that's, I think, a cool thing to do, an extension to that as well.
Really, really tricky task. It reminds me of this game, if you may have played it, but people out there who may have played it, a game called Articulate. Have you ever played?
I love Articulate.
Articulate is one of the most frustrating games unless you are very good at articulating, and if you have the skills to be able to, the capacity to be able to verbally express yourself in that way. But it is so hard when you're put on the spot to try and get your point across in the game, where you have to essentially explain a single word without using the word and articulate what's going on. So very much that same principle where I have to try and explain the orientation and the shape and the directionality or whatever else it is to be able to figure out how that block relates to the one next to it, to the one on top of it, and where it sits. And you feel like you've done a really good job of explaining it.
Yeah,
and then they put it, this is great. And they put it in that way and you're like,
those words I said.
No, that's not okay. I can see how you've interpreted that, and that's not what, in my mind, that's not what it was. Okay. So figuring that out is it's a good skill in itself. Yeah. And how often does that happen in social situations where you're just talking about stuff and having to decipher what someone's saying?
Yeah, absolutely.
It's a good skill building exercise.
And actually in one of the assessment tools that we have using the evaluation and sensory integration, there's that activity where it's following directions. Yeah. And you give an example and they do it, and maybe there's a couple of ways you'll be like, this is how I'm going to tick that off the list. You're like, well, technically they did do it. It's not what I was expecting, but they followed the instruction just in quite a unique way. No, actually, I'm going to score that. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm going with therapy activity of the week as a concept rather than giving an example, but now I'm going to be doing both because I extended from yours. So that's good. Okay, great. But I was reflecting before we came in today about, okay, when it comes to therapy activity of the week, what am I going to say? What have I done with my sessions? And I found myself being like, I was doing this game and taking it in turns doing this across a number of different activities. And then it just was making me think about not the activity itself, but how we use ourselves within those activities. And so that's kind of what I wanted to come and chat through, and how powerful that can be. I have a little person that I've recently started working with, and, we're still building that familiarity with each other, but it was really cool today. We'd set up an activity. He was doing this like jumping and crashing stuff. And then I'd be like, do you reckon what would happen if I did it like this? And he was watching me, and then I would model not quite getting it right. And he's like, well, you need to tuck your legs up. You should cross your legs. I'm like, is that the trick? I'll give it a go. And it just supported so much with this back and forth. And then when I went to do it the next time, I'm like, should I do it like this or like this? And he was helping to give me some suggestions around that. So less around the therapy activity itself, but more just that reminder about using ourselves in the activities.
Therapeutic use of self.
Yeah.
That's a good old therapy 101 there.
Yeah.
Really important, isn't it?
And I think I see you, even in some of the things that you're chatting through, I think you and I, in terms of how we engage in sessions, we do that all the time. And it's not just, hey, I think you should do this, or why don't you try doing that? Like getting in there and having you go yourself. The whole idea being, well, it's not me telling you what to do. We're partners in this. And I think it's a great equalizer as well to be like, well, we're figuring this out together. And I think that can just be really useful.
Nothing more powerful than someone else figuring out a way of solving a problem themselves than you giving them the answer and them just copying what you do. I understand at times you need to scaffold and support, and there might be opportunities where that is needed.
Yeah.
But for a lot of instances, their ability to problem solve, as you said, there are multiple ways to solve an answer, and theirs looks different to yours, and if it works and is effective, then valid. Great.
And I think the reason this came to mind, there was so many, I just had a few little friends who I know if I'd been like, hey, you should do this, they wouldn't have felt comfortable to, or maybe they're not sure what I'm asking, or they don't know how to move their body to do that, or they're looking for a level of control. So if I'm the one that's doing it first and it's not quite working and we're having a bit of a giggle about that, then they can make the choice to jump in and go, hey, can I give that a go? And you're like, yeah, totally. It's your turn next.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I had that moment with my son this morning where he was trying to put this little, I don't know what it is, like a little tin container back together, and there's like a little hinge at the bottom.
Yeah.
And it just come loose, and all it is you put one side, clip it into the other, and put it back together. And he was looking at it going, oh, it's come apart, and I'm like, oh, here, let me do it. It's like, no, I know how to do it. I'm like, okay, yeah, you show me, like you show me what you want to do. And you can see him struggling for a bit. And just before he was about to go and ask me to do it, it kind of clicked in place.
Oh, that's cool.
And it was just like this, and then I told you I knew how to do it. I was like, yeah, well, great. Like, and I showed him after my method was actually going to be this. And it's like, yeah, well, I was going to do it this way. I'm like, okay, that's fine. But you problem solved the way of doing it. And I didn't have to jump in. But the fact that he knew that I was there to support, it's kind of like that body doubling to go. I was
just about to say, yeah.
You're there for support. If you need it, I'm here. If not, I trust you to give it a go.
Yeah. Now next time he'll be like, I don't need you. I've got this.
Don't worry, that happens all the time.
Just another thing in the toolbox.
Yeah, don't need you. Drive myself to the cafe now. Regulation strategy?
Sounds good.
Regulation strategy of the week.
Eli, I just love seeing your confidence build.
Regulation strategy of the week.
So regulation strategy, I didn't have one. Well, I did, and I thought I'd done my homework, and I forgot when I checked my phone. It was blank, which is really pretty average. But I do know someone who does have one.
What is it?
Producer Eli.
Oh, yeah.
He did mention to me earlier about the shower and rainfall and the pressure of water on his head and the sound of water and just the regulating, calming effect that has on him.
There are so many things, and I think going on there, and how many young people do you work with that it's just like a big thing that they have in their toolbox to support regulation is having a shower, like coming home from the school day and just going, hey, I just need to decompress. I need that input. I'm just going to have a shower, and that'll be, it's a good thing to tick off for the day, but then it helps me transition into the remainder of the routines that I've got.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Look, and on the flip side, I know lots of people avoid the shower for a lot of sensory reasons. And there is, it can be very dysregulating for some people, but it's a good example of, regulation strategies can work for some and not for others.
Very true.
But in this case, if it does work, then great. And it could be, for some people, there's it could be a sensory avoiding thing. And we've actually got a question about that coming up in a sec.
Oh, yeah, we do too, yeah.
But I certainly, yes, my sentiments are the same as Eli, that pressure of, or just the feeling in the winter, the warmth of a shower, or sometimes in the summer when it's like really hot and say I've, done some exercise, I come home and just have a cold shower.
Yeah.
Some people are like, how can you have a cold shower? I'm like, but it just refreshes, and it's kind of like, when you have a really nice icy cold drink.
Yeah.
It's like that for your whole body.
Yeah.
And there is something about that it is really regulating.
Yeah. I'm always rushing when it comes to like having a shower and getting organized. So I wish that it's almost like, I wish I'd just slow down for a second and just let that be regulating rather than having it be something that actually almost impacts my regulation. Sure. I'm, quick, I have to shower and do this and then get on with.
That happens.
It's like the first, like in the morning is one of those first steps to then action everything else that you need to do before you get ready for the day. And that's just my personal take on that. But I totally get it though, because it is really nice. I just don't create the space for that to be a regulation strategy for me.
So I'll give you a suggestion then.
Yes,
for a lot of
please.
people is to change and lots of people like to shower in the morning, I get that, but to change the timing of that. If you want it for more of a regulatory effect, then yes, either build time into your morning routine or do it at night, as a way to actually build that into the end of your day to decompress or to allow time to actually for it to be regulating.
Okay, that's true.
I know that there are families that do that, and young people I work with have implemented that, and it's a way to help them regulate before they go to bed.
Yeah.
And it can actually help with the sleep routine. But that's one strategy. But
yeah, but I think it just shows, doesn't it, how something that we do across our day can either be just something that we have to do, or we can build it in a way that supports our regulation, and using that can be so helpful. And
an everyday thing. I'm all about everyday regulation strategies. So, very good one.
But I do love the sound of, like water when I'm down at the beach. Actually, that's one thing that just really resets me, like a walk at the beach. And for me, I think there's lots of sensory components, having my feet in the sand or feet in the water, and then the sound of the waves, like that for me as a sensory experience is super regulating. And I know for me personally, if, I feel like that's just such a reset for me, and that can immediately bring me out of my mind or any, thought processes that might not be so helpful, to then go, okay, take a deep breath and what do I need to do from here?
That's a good segue then for our next question, which was a comment in response to the wrestling video that Dino put up a little while back. Got lots of good feedback from that one. But this one was, what are your thoughts on this with sensory avoidant little ones? I work with families with sleep and definitely suggest this or heavy work, etc., before bed. So the question here was around, can you implement wrestling and deep pressure before bed? But how do you incorporate those sort of strategies with sensory avoidant little ones?
Yeah, I think they definitely recognised how this can be helpful because of that connection piece that comes with it, but it can be very dependent on the young person about how they tolerate that or what their sensory preferences might look like. So, what are your initial thoughts around?
What's the avoidance, the sensory avoidance? Like, what are they actually avoiding? Lots of people talk about, a sensory avoidant profile or sensory seeking profiles. And I always ask the question, what are they seeking? What are they avoiding? And that language comes a lot from the sensory profile, which is Winnie Dunn's sensory profile, which is an approach to look at how someone's sensory preferences are aligned into a what we call a complete profile. And it puts into different, 4 different quadrants. Sensory seeking, sensory avoiding, low registration, and sensory sensitivity is the last one as well. So those 4 quadrants. So yes, and that is an interpretation. There's one way to get that information. But sometimes I feel that is it can be dangerous to place people into one of those 4 quadrants, or to say that their preference is here and there, and I think you have to look at it from a whole profile more holistically. There are certain preferences across whatever setting or whatever sensory field there is, and understand each almost sensory area. So whether it's hearing, touch, smell, taste, and body awareness, balance, other sort of vestibular processing systems, and look at those. Anyway.
But I will say too, on those quadrants, you might see that a young person manages some of those sorts of things. Like we might avoid certain input, or we might seek out certain input, and then you go through a profile like that and it says, well, I end up ranking more than others across the board. And you're like, okay, so I can see there's some sensory things going on, but I'm still struggling to match that with what I'm seeing. I think the profile does go through and say in what areas, we describe against. When you're looking at it from a whole, you're like, oh, I'm more than others in all of those areas. And it's not necessarily that someone would neatly fit into one of those quadrants.
Correct,
and actually the human experience is that we probably all rank differently in each of those. And we're not one or the other, but depending on the input can be a mix of all of them.
And I guess that's it. It's an interpretation. So when and I guess the reason I'm talking about this is because when there are words like sensory avoidant, that's stemming from that profile and understanding that sensory avoidant is one of the 4 quadrants, one of those profiles. So yes, I guess my first question would be what does that profile actually look like? You know, what sort of things are they avoiding, and is it that, you know, if it's are they avoiding nighttime routines generally? Is that a sensory thing, or is that a
demand routine thing?
Yeah, demand routine, or a behavioural thing, or just a regulation that I still need my body to move a bit more, so I'm avoiding going to sleep at this time.
Yep.
Or is it they're avoiding specifically here with rough and tumble, and maybe this is what the question's going with, that this person's suggesting rough and tumble play, but for those who don't like that, are they avoiding the rough and tumble play because they don't like rough and tumble play, or they don't like rough and tumble play in the nighttime routine?
Yeah.
Well, you know, and we start breaking down a little bit more about what's going on and asking more questions. Because, you know, like we talk about all the time as OTs, we try to do that detective work to break down the potential reasons as to why you're seeing a as you say, a behaviour or an expression of what someone's experiencing.
Yeah.
So in terms of heavy work, wrestling is one type of that. That's what I really want to highlight here, is that heavy work is wrestling is one form of that sort of impact.
A few thoughts, I guess, that I had around that. When I think about wrestling, you have to be in such close contact with another person, and it can be very dependent on the other person and what that looks like too. And obviously there's, you know, maybe we don't have full control over what those movement and that input looks like. And so is it actually that we're avoidant around that, or is it that having someone so close in my space where I don't always feel like I've got good control in what that movement looks like can then make it feel really overwhelming? And so trying to then shift that to give them a bit more control could actually still help to get that deep pressure input. And probably kind of like what we were saying earlier, that maybe it's more like, rather than wrestling, it's like a jump and crash, and maybe you're modelling that first and they're going, oh, that looks like pretty good fun, and they're giving it a go as well. Or even, I know sometimes with my little nephew, I'll go like, I want to squish with the pillow. And so he'll put the pillow on me and we'll go squeeze, and he'll apply that pressure for me, but he's technically working against resistance and pushing. But then I'm also modelling for him what that could look like if he chose to engage with that, because he's someone I've tried to do that with him, and then he'll wriggle away. I'm like, oh, okay, I can see that feels like too much because I'm the one that's implementing that. But this other way around, he's got some control, and I think you can just shift what that feels like for him. So rather than being alerting, it can still have that grounding input.
Yeah. And you know, some people say that wrestling or deep pressure like that can be, you know, revving kids up or alerting them before bedtime. And I think for some it might be. Yeah. And that might be an indication it's not the right deep pressure that they need. Yeah. So that in itself is a good cue to go, okay, this is not actually working. Yeah. We need to modify how we do it. And you've talked about things like blanket rolls before, and that's another way to provide that, as well as that, you know, that rolling or vestibular movement as well. But absolutely, I think wrestling is a great approach because, you know, there's a lot of people that have talked about it more recently as being quite effective. From research and evidence base, that deep pressure can be effective, but it doesn't work with everybody. So
just one way to get it.
It is one way to get it. Yeah,
and I think as well, you know, sometimes we talk about, well, what level of input is required to have the impact that we're looking for.
That threshold.
So you know, I guess for some young people, I'm going to do what you normally do, Mike. I'm going to gesture a lot with my hands, but try and use my words as I map it out. But you know, for some young people, when I think about those levels of alertness and arousal, when sometimes they're getting that input initially, we might see that start to creep up and escalate because it is quite excitatory. But then we start, after a certain period of time, you start to see it plateau out and then come down the other side to then start entering more of this regulating space. For some young people, it's effective straight away to help lower those levels of alertness. But for others, it's about hitting the amount of time within that. So if we're looking to wrestle for 5 minutes, then be like, anyway, yep, off to bed, that might not quite have the impact that we're looking for. But if you're really dedicating that that time, it might actually be not the input itself, but the amount of time with the input that then supports regulation.
It's like the good old-fashioned acronym, the FIT principles, the frequency, intensity, time, and type.
Okay.
You use it for, a lot of people use it for sport and stuff, but it can very much transfer across to regulation strategies.
Yep.
What's the frequency of it? How often are you doing it?
Yep.
What is the level of intensity that's required? What type of activity and the amount of time you're doing it for?
Yep.
So you might say, well, I only do this once a day, and this is something that is a high level of intensity. I do it for 5 minutes, and it's a real big, deep pressure activity.
Yep.
As opposed to, say, something a little bit smaller. So it could be like, I chew gum to regulate.
Yep.
And I do that, every hour or something. I chew a bit of gum, and the intensity is a bit lower.
Yep.
But the time I do it for is a couple of minutes, and it's something I do very frequently.
Yeah.
So you think about that, and you're starting to build together your sensory diet or your sensory toolkit. And this is where I think something like, whether it's rough and tumble before bed or whether it's another form of deep pressure or whatever worked for that person, you've got to get them involved in the decision making, right?
Yeah.
If they know what they need, that's great. But sometimes they don't. But sometimes you can trial and error and try things. And if you find something that works, then keep going with it.
Yeah. And if it's wrestling, awesome. And if it's not, well, what else?
What else can we do?
Yeah. Yeah. Very fair.
Now, we actually just had a question that came through right now. Did you want to answer it
Live?
live? Yeah?
Sounds good.
Okay. This is, hi, big fan of the podcast. I was wondering if you had any ways to practice deep breathing with children with emotions. Oh, hang on, I'll read it again. Sorry. I was wondering.
What's the problem with going live?
I know. I was wondering if you had any ways to practice deep breathing with children when emotions are running high. Ways to make it fun / immersive / physical. I love the example given a while ago with the swing, but don't always have access to one. Okay.
Cool.
Interesting question.
Yeah. And I think I do want to frame this question too. I think when emotions are running high and sometimes you're looking at them going, oh, I can see this kind of unraveling a little bit. I think we need to access something really regulating. It's kind of like that situation where, you might see something like, okay, you just need to calm down for a minute. But actually got to be careful about how we frame this and when we introduce it, because sometimes when we are in that really heightened state going, okay, we just need to take a few deep breaths, that might not have the intended impact. So I think that's important to consider too about when we look to implement some of the deep breathing, even though it's going to be so helpful for them in coming back from those escalated points.
Yeah. One way that I know when I'm working with, say, teenagers is when they're experiencing that, maybe that more heightened state.
Yeah.
Is to validate and give space and either engage in an activity almost in that parallel play.
Yeah.
Or in how I model
certain
things. So I might start to slow my tone of voice down. Or I might actually start to take some deep breaths before I actually breathe and actually model how I want them to breathe or how I'm actually responding to the situation. To see if they pick up on that subconsciously as opposed to going, just take some deep breaths.
Yeah.
Even a suggestion of, did you want to go? Should we go for a walk? Or should we get out of this space?
Yeah.
That's one way that I think could work with any young person.
Yep.
I'm a big fan of diversion.
Mm-hmm. Yes,
so
I know.
I will use that all the time. Now, sometimes I know that can get me in trouble, particularly with my son, where I'm diverting from an issue or a situation because it kind of feels like I'm kicking the can down the road. Mm-hmm. But what I try and do in that instance is go, okay, we're not going to solve this right now.
Yeah.
Let's shift our focus to something else. And in doing so, I might be able to then implement some
100%.
things around.
Yep.
Like, can I model deep breathing or can we move to something that's regulating?
Yeah.
And move to more of a sensory motor task.
I think even with hearing you say that, it's sort of brought me back to a few of those kind of moments. I think about a gorgeous friend of mine who, he just feels things very deeply and quite intensely at times. And so I remember there was once where there was quite a point of frustration and seeing those emotions start to run high. And I'm like, actually, you know what? We need to move out of the space here. And so that was kind of like that initial redirection that I'm here to keep him safe. I'm here to keep others safe. And a quick exit from this is exactly what we need right now. So I was able to help, I guess, guide him out, and he ended up just sort of, he found a little corner and sat down within that and just was feeling what happened in that moment quite deeply. And I just happened to be holding a hopper ball and had carried that out with me. And then now this is someone that I've known for a long time, and I know that we have a very safe connection. And so I was able just to, you know, reiterate that, like, I'm here, and just apply a bit of deep pressure while he was seated there. And he ended up like grabbing hold of the ball and like kind of being there. Yeah. And then I just watched, I guess his breathing was very much like, not hyperventilation, but quick breaths in. And then just with a bit of that space, and I started to deep breathe too. So I never actually said, let's do some deep breathing. I decided to, like what you were just saying, started to big breath in, big breath out. And then over time, he then started to do it as well. And then eventually, like you were saying, to then go, that was really hard back there. And then he was able to use his words to share what it looked like. But I couldn't have done that with him in that space, in the moment, as it was happening. I had to create the opportunity for that to be something that we could step to next.
One thing I do see used and can be effective if it's done the right way is, I guess it depends on the feeling of the emotion. Sometimes when it's frustration or, you know, anger or some of those really big feelings, right?
Yeah.
Telling someone what to do can be quite triggering or can go the other way. When you can see a real feeling of, and, you know, I mean, those feelings may be based on anxiety, but when you can see when someone 100%. Is kind of caught and they're not sure and they're very anxious and they're starting to spiral and catastrophize, then I have found that sometimes suggesting I can always going with the validation.
Yep.
And I can see this, let's breathe together.
Yep.
Or implementing that there can actually help give them a plan.
Yep.
And it can take away the uncertainty of what's going to happen.
Yep.
If it's that really short, you know, quite rapid breathing.
Yeah.
To get them breathing more effectively. And, you know, we certainly know that, you know, for those who've worked in the mental health space or things like mental health first aid, that if someone has experienced a panic attack, how you might approach that.
Yep.
And certainly being able to guide someone through that situation does help. And I think that can certainly be taught with little ones, but I think it also comes down to the language you use.
Yeah.
You know, you got to pitch it to their level.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, if you're pitching it at a level that's like an adult going, you know, sit down, do some deep breathing, blah, 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 like, then they're going to go, I'm not. That doesn't work for me.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think it depends on the context as well and what sort of emotions being experienced.
And we're obviously talking to, I think, like in the real peak of what that emotional escalation might look like. But I'm also a big advocate for this in like as a proactive measure. Yeah. So it makes me, and I guess probably going back to the question there about like fun and immersive ways, there's a few different sort of tools and things that you can use. I like the box breathing to map it out is really helpful. And this one always makes me smile because it brings me back to in some sessions before we would come together for a group game, there was a beautiful young man who's like, I would like to take the group through a box breathing series before we engage in this activity. And of course, us as OTs were like, that sounds awesome. That's exactly what my body needs, just to reset from what I've been doing, get myself ready from this and just make sure I'm ready to go. And so as a group, we'd all sit together and this gorgeous young man would go, okay, everyone, fingers up, and take a deep breath in, and then we'd all follow the breathing exercise together as a group. So it's kind of the way the box breathing works. You're imagining drawing like a square in the air with your finger. And so from the first point, once again, I'm doing this as I'm talking, but it's, you know, you draw the line across the top of the square first, take a deep breath in. When you reach the end of that line, you hold the breath as you're drawing the next two lines of the square, and then you can breathe out as you're coming back towards the top, or whatever that looks like for you. So I think I like how grounding that is, because I guess there's a doing part in addition to the breathing itself. And that's why something too, like a 5-finger or caterpillar breathing, where it's the exact same thing. You're tracing along the outline of your hand. Each time you draw up along your finger, big breath in. As you come down, big breath out. You try and take that at a really even pace, or even like blowing out the candles. You've got someone, you hold your hand up, and each exhale that you take, you lower a finger down. Because I just think that it's a connection piece with your body rather than having your mind so focus on what's happening around you and what might be heightening for you. It's bringing you back into yourself, which can help lower those arousal levels too. So there's a few kind of, fun ways that I know to do that. How are some other ways that you teach deep breathing stuff? Is that pretty consistent for you?
Yeah, pretty consistent for me. I think when I have worked with some of the older clients.
Probably looks a bit different there.
Yeah, but similar methods. Like you can still use those same methods with an older client base, but even things like the rise and fall of chest and the feeling of that. So you're actually feeling the difference between. And we do some of these activities when working through interoceptive skills.
Yeah, that's cool.
And certainly just being able to feel the difference between when we're breathing effectively and when we're not. And I always back it up with, did you know that when we breathe effectively or when we are managing our breathing, our brain actually opens up more pathways and it allows us to think better. Like it actually, and people are like, what do you mean? I'm like, well, there's research, and I sometimes even go onto the computer or explain to them that breathing actually allows our brain to think. And when we're not breathing effectively, the brain really shuts down.
Yeah.
And show them images of, functional MRI scans of the difference between breathing and not breathing. And obviously not in the moment.
Yeah.
But post that, right, there's too much information. But post that to say, you know how we did the breathing earlier or before or last week? This is exactly what's happening. So they get the evidences to, okay, this is not just Michael saying breathing is a good way to manage how I'm feeling. There's actually evidence as to breathing helps my brain function better in those moments.
Sure.
And sometimes that evidence can be the justification as to why a technique's used.
Yeah, for sure. So I guess really we've answered that in 3 parts. So there's the psychoeducation piece to actually go, well, why is deep breathing important? How does that help my mind and my body? What kinds of times is this going to be effective? And that's not, like you said, you're not teaching that in the moment, but this is stuff that you're doing around that, so that when we're in that really heightened state, it becomes, we're not trying to problem solve to access that. It becomes a little bit more, I guess, a bit more automatic. Then we were also talking about proactive opportunities to bring that in. So we're doing that before we're reaching a point when emotions are running high, in a chance to maybe reset a little bit. But once again, because we're in that problem solving state, we can take on those concepts and activate that. And I guess then the third point, when it really is in the midst of a big emotion, focus on the de-escalation and then see how we might be able to introduce that or model that. But I guess for both of us, we were really sharing that we're not using language around that. I suppose the focus and the deep breathing there comes from the co-regulation aspect, and kind of, seeing where that can support from that point.
And it comes back to your comment you made earlier about the therapy activity, which is therapeutic use of self.
Yeah.
In that moment, co-regulation is very much about modeling and how you therapeutically use yourself in that moment to model a way to de-escalate.
Yeah.
And a way to see a way through what's going on at this time. So a few thoughts to think about there.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely.
Hopefully answered the questions, and hopefully we get some more coming through.
Sounds good.
But that's about it for this week.
Yeah. Anything else to add?
No, I don't think so. I think answered a few, and if anybody else does have questions, obviously send them through to our email, which we mentioned at the top of the show, podcast.TFC group, otherwise Instagram.
Yeah.
And otherwise Scatman John for the rest of the week.
Got some things to listen to.
Definitely.
Can't wait.
All right, shout out to Fletch and everyone else listening. And
lots of deep breaths, let it go. Thanks,
good.
everyone. Good night.